Do you think that the church failed the LGBTQIA plus community?
I think the American church very much fails and has failed the LGBTQ community. The original church didn't. You find an Ethiopian eunuch that's being baptized, and the eunuchs were the sexual minority of their day. I won't go as far as to say they were gay or lesbian, or this particular eunuch was gay or transgender, but there's a high probability that he may have been. And it kind of speaks to the fact that he probably was anatomically whole. The fact that when he asked, "Is there a reason I can't be baptized?" that Philip tells him, "No, there's no reason you can't," and baptizes him anyway. And to speak to his anatomical wholeness would mean that he could be a eunuch without being castrated. And historically, those people are gay. And so when I talk about this gay eunuch, or this queer eunuch, or however you want to describe him, that's where I'm coming from. First century church used to do brother making ceremonies, which would be our equivalent today of not necessarily a marriage, but maybe a domestic union. So where's two men or two women, and there were incidences of two women doing this as well. I guess sister making unions where they fall in love, they want to be family, and so the church blesses that union, and they go about their way in their life as a united couple. And we know that that happened in history. Now, and there's a lot to be said about church history and where that took a turn and all of that. I won't go into, all of that. I don't know it offhand anyway. I need to, refer to some notes or something. But there was a turn that took when homosexuality or same gender loving people became under attack. And that has followed its way into what we know as Christianity today, especially American Christianity, places in Africa. A lot of it has to do with colonization. A lot of it has to do with European Christianity and the fact that most of our Christianity that we know derives, even the African Christianity that we know, most of it derives from Europe and colonization. So, yeah, the influence of colonization, I believe, destroyed any type of inclusion that we would have had.
Gotcha. And then not even that. There's this like, I think like the I would say like the biggest lie that a lot of people keep forgetting is even like the city of Sodom. They're always like, oh, I remember. The only reason I bring this up is because I remember the gay club in Orlando that got shot up. I think like 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And then like I
Yes.
just remember the
Mm.
church's response. They were like, oh, see, that's God's judgment just raining down on them. It's just like Sodom, da 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 da. I'm like, Sodom was destroyed because of the, you know, trigger warning, like the amount of rape and assault that was happening. Not exactly because, like, like the nature of sexual acts. You know what I'm saying? And like that's what we've seen so many times where people they demonize how I would say like people live their lives, justify the wickedness. And I'm not saying like what happened in Sodom was wicked, meaning like what God chose as far as judgment for them was wicked. But then we'll go and we'll associate the Bible to a villainous act like what happened in the Orlando gay club, and people don't recognize that like you end up polluting the gospel, and it's harder. I would just say that our public witness is soiled by that because our Christianity does indeed get associated by homophobia, and it's really cringing because like for me, like I'm not gonna lie, there was times like in especially in those evangelical spaces I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that makes perfect sense, but now I'm just like, oh my god, like this is awful. um it's I have to, I would say like I have to constantly remember and check my bias, especially since one, I didn't get saved till I was 19. I've been straight and cis my whole life, and that is a challenge, but it shouldn't be that challenging to the point that I start demonizing people and sentencing them to death, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah, Ezekiel 16 tells us why it was destroyed, and it's because the people were inhospitable. The story is a lot deeper than just they wanted to have sex with the angels. They wanted to gang rape the angels, like you said, trigger warning already, but that's what they wanted to do, and that's not sexuality. That's domination, that's brutality, and that's what they were looking to do. I think the story that really hits that whole thing home, even besides Ezekiel, is in Judges 19. And when you read Judges 19, there's a really similar story to the Sodom and Gomorrah story. The difference is there was so what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, there were strangers from the outside that did not live in Sodom, had never been to Sodom. They were coming into the town. The people, of course, didn't know they were angels at the time. They were coming. They needed someone to open their doors for hospitality purposes, which was custom and which was literally a sacred act in those days, to open your home to the stranger. The people didn't want to do that. The people of Sodom did not want to do that. And so when Lot did it, they were angry. They came, they demanded that they bring those people out so that they can pretty much assault them. And then when they he said, listen, you can have my daughters. Don't do it to these men. Don't assault them. Take my daughters. They refused the daughters, and the angels end up closing the door, and God rains sulfur and fire and brimstone onto the city and destroys it. You go to Judges 19, same exact story, only there's a Levite and his concubine, two visitors, one male, one female. They go to a Levite's house, and or a Benjaminite's house, and they say, can we have lodging? The man says yes, and he puts them up for the evening. Same thing happens. All the men of the town beat on the door, say, open up, send us that man. We want to sexually assault him. He's like, don't do it. I have daughters. You can have them. No, we don't want your daughters. But this is the kicker. They sent out the concubine, who was also a stranger, and they brutalized her to the point of death. By the next morning, she had died. If it had been about homosexuality, they wouldn't have wanted the concubine. All this time they've been teaching Sodom and Gomorrah is about homosexuality. That's the reason they didn't want the women. No, they didn't want the women because they wanted to mistreat a stranger. If there had been a female stranger, they would have taken her too, and they probably would have killed her, just like Judges 19.
And the sad thing is like, we can talk about this all day, but we act like women have not been taken advantage of to some degree in the goodness for the sake of their husbands. Like as early as even like the father of our faith having to pay a debt. He's like, hey, Sarah, honey, sweetie, could you help me out with I forgot what Yo's name was. I think was it Pharaoh, matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken. That he was like, hey, he's like, I need to clear my balance. You know what I'm saying? So it's not to say like we haven't seen that before, where like whether it is the foreigner, the stranger, or women are being used as bartering pieces to help clear, settle, and flatten debt. So it's not like it's that's ever been above anybody ever doing so. You know what I'm saying? But we could spend all day on that for sure.